But before we dive into the disturbing tales of the night, let me ask you, do you have the courage to stay until the end? Most viewers don't subscribe to the channel, perhaps out of oversight, or perhaps because after hearing these stories, they never slept the same way again. If you think you can handle it, click subscribe now.
Can I tell you something strange that happened to me? I'm not the type of person who easily believes in supernatural stuff. But this happened to me, and I've never been able to forget it. I was living in Guadalajara when I was studying architecture at university. The workload was insane, and it was common to stay late on campus with my group, finishing models or projects. One of those late nights, after finishing everything, I rushed to the bathroom, and when I came out, everyone had already left. I hadn't taken my car, and back then, minus 2013, Uber didn't exist here. A taxi, impossible to find at 3 a.m. in that area. My only option was to walk to my grandmother's house, about a 25-minute walk through Colonia Miravalle, which is kind of isolated, full of old houses, all facing a huge empty lot. It's the kind of street that seems to have given up on life. I had a spare key to her house, even though I wasn't that close to her. My grandmother was kind of distant, one of those people who always seemed to look at you with a hint of judgment. But she was my grandmother, and I needed a place to sleep. When I got to the house, I tried to open the front door with the key. It went in, turned, but the door wouldn't open, like something was pushing from the inside. I started knocking and pushing. I called out to my grandmother. Nothing. I pushed so hard that the door opened about 5 centimeters, just enough for me to see something moving inside. Someone ran from the backyard into the house. It was just a blur, but I swear to God it was a figure. A few seconds later, my grandmother appears at the door, in a nightgown. Her eyes were red. And I'm not talking about the cried a lot kind. They were red like the blood vessels were bursting or something. She looked at me for a few seconds before asking, "What are you doing here?" I explained that I had no way to get home, that I needed to sleep there. She stood there, silent. It was about 15 seconds of silence, and it wasn't that awkward silence. It was a silence that felt like a warning. "Give me a minute," she said, and closed the door in my face. But before the door closed completely, I saw it, through the small window in the door. Behind her, in the backyard, there was a red light, and 3 women, naked, standing in a triangle. They weren't moving, they were just there. The door opened again a few minutes later. My grandmother acted like nothing had happened. The house seemed normal, silent, but the smell was strange. A strong mixture of burnt herbs and incense. She said I could sleep on the couch. I didn't sleep. I stayed awake all night, staring at the back door. 5 years later, my grandmother died. She didn't leave anything to anyone in the family. Only the house, but not to me. Not even to my mother. She left the house to a friend. No one ever found out who she was. We never went back there. But if anyone lives near Miravalle and on a cold night hears laughter, or sees a red light flashing through the old windows of a house on the corner of street, maybe it's best to pretend you didn't see anything. Hoje resolvi compartilhar uma das experiências mais intensas e inexplicáveis que vivi, e o pior, com minha família inteira junto. Sou de São Luís Potosí, e sempre tive essa alma meio aventureira. Amo trilhas, caminhadas em mato fechado, lugares históricos esquecidos. Sempre fui dessas. Um dos meus lugares favoritos sempre foi o Cerro del Tecolote, uma área enorme ao sul da cidade que abriga ruínas antigas, cavernas e, segundo a lenda, energia carregada. Claro, isso nunca me impediu de explorar. Em 2019, decidi levar minha família comigo. Meus filhos Sofia e Tomás, na época com 12 fortim, meu marido Ernesto e nossa cachorrinha Luna, que adotamos um ano antes. Luna era do tipo que farejava o ar com o focinho franzido quando algo estava errado. E naquela tarde, ela já estava inquieta. Começamos a trilha por volta das 3 da tarde. Entramos pelo lado do antigo cemitério municipal, que sim, tem um buraco no muro que te leva direto à trilha principal. É informal, mas muita gente entra por ali. Já estive naquele cerro dezenas de vezes. Sabia exatamente o caminho até o topo, onde há uma espécie de mirante de pedra e algumas pirâmides pequenas escondidas pelo mato. A subida estava tranquila. Paramos para lanchar, tirar fotos, brincar com Luna, até que do nada a gente viu um grupo de pessoas descendo em direção a uma das cavernas. Nada demais, estavam vestidos normalmente, roupas civis. Ficamos observando, eles desapareceram lá dentro, mas não saíam mais. Esperamos uns 30 minutos. Nada. Decidimos continuar subindo. Mas foi aí que tudo começou a mudar. A trilha, que eu conhecia de olhos fechados, começou a parecer errada. O chão afundava mais do que o normal, como se a terra estivesse mole, encharcada menos, mas não havia chovido. Cada passo exigia o dobro de força. Era como andar num pesadelo. Minhas pernas tremiam, o ar estava parado. Ernesto reclamava do peso nas costas, mas a mochila estava quase vazia. Tomás e Sofia começaram a perder o ritmo. Até Luna parou. Choramingava, sentada, se recusando a continuar. Foi nesse momento que me dei conta. Eu não tinha feito o ritual de permissão. Desde pequena, meu pai me ensinou que, ao entrar em qualquer área de mata ou montanha pouco frequentada, é preciso pedir licença, em voz alta, aos guardiões do lugar. Pode parecer superstição, mas é uma tradição antiga em muitas partes do México. Eu sempre fazia, mas naquela vez esqueci. Estava tão empolgada em mostrar tudo para eles que não fiz. E agora parecia que o próprio cerro queria nos expulsar ou nos engolir. Comecei a murmurar um pedido de desculpas, em voz baixa, quase rezando. Perdão, não quise ofender. Solo queremos conhecer. Por favor, déjanos salir. Meus filhos estavam esgotados. Ernesto começou a empurrar Tomás morro acima, enquanto eu amarrei a guia da Luna na minha cintura e arrastei Sofia. O sol estava se escondendo. E eu sabia que, se a noite nos pegasse ali, a gente não ia sair. Foi uma subida desesperadora, mas de repente, lá estava ela. A barreira de metal da estrada, o sinal de que tínhamos escapado. Choramos, juro. Nos abraçamos como se tivéssemos saído de um incêndio. Mas aí veio a parte mais estranha de todas. Na descida pela estrada, notamos outras pessoas caminhando conosco. Crianças, um casal, um grupo familiar, todos indo no mesmo ritmo. Ninguém falou com a gente, é o caminho heaven. Mas, quando finalmente alcançamos a entrada da trilha, não havia mais ninguém. Olhei para trás, a estrada vazia. Silêncio absoluto. Sofia perguntou: Mãe, e a galera que estava descendo com a gente? Só estávamos nós 4. E Luna, nem o barulho de grilos, nem vento. Só um vazio imenso. Quero acreditar que aquelas pessoas nos acompanharam para proteger, que não estávamos sozinhos porque alguma força lá dentro teve piedade da gente. Mas sinceramente, acho que se não tivéssemos pedido desculpas a tempo, nunca teríamos saído do Cerro do Tecolote. My name is Gerardo Ruiz, and I live in El Paso, Texas, right on the border with Ciudad Juarez. I grew up here, always surrounded by Mexican culture, by my grandparents' stories, by the cuentos you hear but never want to believe. Only sometimes those stories come knocking at your door. Literally, the first time I heard La Llorona, I was 17 years old. I'd left a party with my friends and was heading home around 4 in the morning. My family lived in an alley behind the Rio Grande, where the tall grass and the water created that perfect setting for tragedy. I was a little drunk, walking down the alley towards my house, when a freezing breeze came, the kind that feels like it goes right through to your bones, and along with the wind, a wail. A low cry, weak, but filled with pain. I wasn't scared. Actually, I laughed. I blamed the tequila, the sleepiness, anything. When I got home, I told my mum, laughing. She gave me a dry look and said, "Never joke about that, because the day she looks at you, you'll stop laughing." She was right. Years later, I was married to Liz, and we had a 3-year-old daughter. We were living upstairs in my parents' house, in a room with a huge window facing directly towards the canal. My cousin Tony lived next door. I started hearing the same wail, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes at dawn. Always the same thing, a long, drawn-out, sad cry, and the neighborhood dogs would start howling along with it. I told Tony. He laughed, of course. He even suggested that next time we go hunting for La Llorona. I agreed. The next time I heard her, I'd call him, and it wasn't long. One muggy night, the wail came again. I got up and shouted, "Tony, brother, wake up." "It's her," he just replied. "You go, man. I'm passing on this one." I teased him about it for days. Coward, scared, fearful, but I had no idea what I was calling. Because, a short time later, Liz found out she was pregnant with our second daughter, and La Llorona intensified. I started hearing her every night, but now Liz was hearing her too. Even on days when I didn't hear anything, she'd wake up sweating, trembling, saying there was a cry outside. Our daughter, still in the womb, would move like crazy every time La Llorona appeared. It was like she was reacting to the sound. When Valentina was born, she barely slept. She'd cry non-stop, but it wasn't a normal cry. It was a cry of terror, like she was seeing something we couldn't see. And, soon after, the wailing would start. We tried everything. We listened to all kinds of advice, putting bowls of water under the crib, praying every day at 3 in the morning, leaving a Bible open to Psalm 91, tying a deer eye to her stroller. It would work for a few days, but it would come back, always come back. Valentina would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, and I saw her. I swear to God, I saw her. One night, I got out of bed with her crying, and when I looked out the window, I saw a woman standing on the sidewalk, in white, long hair covering her face. She wasn't moving, she was just there, and soon, the wailing. My mum told me, "She wants your daughter, and she comes whenever you talk about her. Shut your mouth, stop mentioning her, and protect the girl." Since then, I stopped telling the story. It always got worse when I told it. Little by little, it faded. I think when we baptized Val, things started to get better. She still had nightmares. Sometimes she'd wake up screaming, but it wasn't every day anymore. It wasn't her anymore. It was like La Llorona had given up. Today, Valentina is 10 years old. She loves horror stories. Every now and then, I joke, "Remember your godmother, the one who cried on the sidewalk?" She laughs, gives me a weird look, but sometimes I catch her looking out the window, quiet, like she's waiting for something. If you live near the canal in El Paso, and one night you hear a faint cry coming from the weeds, don't look, don't answer, and for the love of God, don't say her name out loud. It's been almost 2 years since this happened, and I still can't talk about it without getting that knot in my stomach. My name is Daniel. I'm 24. I live in North Carolina, and yes, I'm obsessed with abandoned places. Factories, villages, disused railways. If it's old, forgotten, and off the map, I want to see it. That's how I ended up finding out about a place the locals call Devil's Hollow. They say it was an industrial town back in the 70s, where all the workers lived in housing around the factory. It was all abandoned after a fire, or bankruptcy, or disappearances. Every person I ask, the story changes. But the point is, nobody goes there. And that, of course, only made me more interested. I called my friend Eric. It was a Sunday, already about 10 at night, and I had my new motorcycle. Didn't even think twice. Wanna go to Devil's Hollow? Are you crazy? Now, exactly. And he agreed. We rode for almost an hour. The idea was to get to the main entrance of the old factory, where they say there are still lampposts and some old graffiti. But the route the GPS gave us, it didn't make sense. Instead of going towards the hollow, it pushed us onto a small country road, getting narrower and narrower, with cracked asphalt, full of trees closing in on both sides. And the strangest thing, no house had lights on. None. No pole. No car. No porch light. It was as if we were passing through a place where nobody had lived for decades. But the houses seemed inhabited, relatively well maintained, just dark. We tried to laugh about the situation, like two idiots. Seems like a scene from a horror movie. If a goat shows up, standing up and speaking Latin, I'm turning around, but the truth, the tension was already getting to us. About 30 minutes later, we saw the first illuminated thing. A small statue of the Virgin Mary, built into a wall with a weak, bluish light, flickering as if it was about to go out. We stopped. We stood looking, and then the light started to fail. Flickering faster, then it went out. We laughed, out of nervousness. Was that like a warning? Let's get out of here. I sped up, but the worst was yet to come. Minutes later, the air turned cold. Not cool, cold. Like we were going down in an elevator to a basement where there's no sun. That's when we saw it. In the middle of the road, a cat, but not a normal cat. It was big, huge, as big as a wolf. Tense body, black fur, eyes glowing in the darkness. But that wasn't the strangest thing. It was looking at us with a human look, not in a figurative sense. The eyes were wrong, deep, like it was evaluating us, like it knew. I froze. Eric too. It didn't run. It wasn't startled by the headlight. It just walked to the side of the road, very slowly, stopped, and continued staring. We had to pass it. There was no other route. I passed quickly, and at that moment, I was sure of one thing. If it wanted, we wouldn't get out of there. We didn't say a word for almost 10 minutes. But then, it appeared again. Further ahead, standing on the left side of the road. Same position, same look. Only this time, it stood up on 2 legs. Like a person, it took 2 steps, slow ones, then sat down on the side of the road, like it was, waiting for us. That wasn't a cat. I sped up as much as I could. I didn't look back. I just wanted to get out of there. When we finally got back to the main road, we almost exploded with relief. We stopped at a gas station and just stood there, breathing. Eric looked at me. Dude, that wasn't an animal, right? I just shook my head. It wasn't. And, since then, sometimes, I still see those eyes before I go to sleep. fixed, intelligent, watching, and, even stranger, my GPS saved that route as a suggested route, even after I deleted it. The name of the road, Old Hollow Trail, but nobody in the region knows that name. It doesn't even appear on the map. If anyone in North Carolina has ever seen anything like this, especially in the mountainous regions near Asheville, please comment here. I need to know I'm not alone in this. It's been almost 10 years since this happened, but I still can't walk down that avenue at night. Not even in a car, not even with people around. I used to live in East Side Detroit, in an old part of the city, full of streets that had become ghost corridors after half the residents moved out. A place where every abandoned house seemed to hold something or someone that was trapped in time. Back then, I was in my early 20s. I was coming back from a date at my girlfriend's house, who is now my wife. Like any young couple, we always wanted more time together. We stayed late, and her mum, kind of fed up, basically kicked me out with that subtle mum way. If you don't want to miss your ride, you better go now. It was 11:40 p.m. I remember the exact time, because I looked at my phone before running out to catch the last bus. I got off at the nearest stop and started cutting through the streets of my neighborhood. It's about a 15-minute walk, but that night, something was wrong from the beginning. Detroit at night has a characteristic sound. Dogs barking far away, cars speeding on distant streets, music leaking from windows, but that night, total silence, as if someone had pressed a button and put the world on mute. I was walking fast, like my mum taught me, firm step, without looking to the sides. But as I walked, I started to feel heavy, like the air was sticking to my legs. Like when you dream you're trying to run, but your body won't obey. And then came that feeling, someone behind me. At first, I thought it was just paranoia, but the presence was getting closer, more suffocating. With each corner, it stuck closer to the back of my neck. I didn't dare look. Everything in me screamed, "Don't look, don't look, keep walking." But the steps behind me increased. One became two became many, and then laughter of children. High-pitched giggles, mixed with phrases that at first I didn't understand, until they started to make sense. Run, romantic. Run, idiot. The end awaits you on the corner, and that broke me. My feet froze, my body sweating cold. The fear was so physical that it hurt in my chest. But then, against everything I knew, I looked. Only a glimpse out of the corner of my left eye, and it was enough. They were children, about 10, maybe more. Boys and girls, dressed in clothes from different eras, like old costumes. Some seemed to have come from a ball in the 20s, others from a funeral. But the faces, the eyes, they weren't eyes. They were pits, black, empty, without shine, without bottom. And they smiled, wide smiles, too many teeth, too white, like a shark's. I ran. I've never run so much in my life. It was like the street stretched out with every step, like the corner that would save me would never come. But on the last turn, there in front of the abandoned school on Taylor Street, I turned, and the sound stopped. Everything disappeared. The laughter, the steps. It was as if they had dissolved into the air, as if that corner was the line between their world and ours. I arrived home breathless. I went up the stairs, stumbling. My mum looked at me from the kitchen. "Are you okay?" I just shook my head. I had no voice, but their words still echoed in my head. The destination of the arrival is ours. Run, idiot. But we always come back. Years later, I saw stories online about the black-eyed kids. Children with black eyes, strange skin, a suffocating presence. But I never saw anyone mention the teeth. Nobody talks about the teeth. They laugh, they know you're going to break, and if you look, they stay with you.